at Westminster Abbey, where we've had a lovely tour and we've learned a lot about the history of time and navigation.
So we just saw the tombs of John Harrison and Sir Cloudesley Shovel, and we got a little bit of time to sketch Sir Cloudesley Shovel and just looked at his tombstone, and it definitely was not what we were expecting at all.
Hi, we're here to talk today about Cloudesley Shovel. He was an Englishman who originally started as a cabin boy, and he rose through the ranks of the Navy to eventually achieve his own command. Shortly before he received his own command, he defeated a large amount of pirates and was given an award by Charles II. However, being a sailor was always a tricky business, especially in the area of navigation. On the 22nd of October, 1707, Cloudesley Shovel's fleet, on the way back from fighting the French, hit the rocks off of the islands of Scilly, and 2,000 men drowned. It was rumored that Shovel had lived through the actual crash, but was murdered by a woman for his ring. There's also a rumor connected to this event that a common sailor informed Shovel that they were going in the wrong direction before they hit the rocks. However, Shovel had him hanged. It is not clear whether this is true, but it is pretty ironic if it is. Shovel is significant to the history of navigation because his death, along with the deaths of 2,000 men, led to the Queen of England to offer a prize for the solution to the navigation problem of longitude. This eventually led to Harrison's invention of the nautical clock, which allowed longitude to finally be measured. This is a sketch of the tomb of Sir Cloudesley Shovel, and his body was moved to Westminster Abbey. And as you can see, his pose is fairly strange for our standards, but it's a very ornate tomb. It's made of marble, and there is an inscription on there, and this is what it says. Sir Cloudesley Shovel, Rear Admiral of Great Britain, and Admiral and Commander-in-Chief of the fleet. The soft rewards of his long and faithful service. He was deferredly beloved of his country, and esteemed though dreaded by the enemy, who had often experienced his conduct and courage. Being shipwrecked on the rocks of Scilly in his voyage from Toulon, the 22nd of October, 1707 at night, in the 57th year of his age. His fate was lamented by all, but especially the seafaring part of the nation, to whom he was a generous patron and a worthy example. His body was flung on the shore and was buried with others in the sands, but soon after was taken up and was placed under this monument, which his royal mistress had caused to be created to commemorate his steady loyalty and extraordinary virtue.
So we don't really know much about John Harrison's early life. We pretty much just know that in his early years he was a carpenter, and he gained his education much in the same way that Abraham Lincoln and others gained their education, through self-education. He pretty much had to teach himself. We do know that he was the oldest of 5 children, and that later on his brother helped him to make some of the clocks. We aren't sure either how he figured out how to make clocks, or if he just figured this out by himself, if he took one apart. But we do know that he figured out how to make clocks, and before the age of 20, he had made his first pendulum clock. Once Harrison figured out about the prize for figuring out longitude, he poured himself into the task. He worked on H1 and finally created it, and it was a clock that was able to travel on a ship without losing too much time in the process. And this was honestly just an amazing concept, because no one thus far had been able to achieve a clock that had been able to keep perfect time at all, let alone on a moving ship with changing temperatures and a lot of other factors. It didn't look much like a clock, and it was rather heavy and cumbersome, but you know, it was fairly accurate. Not perfect, but much more accurate than any clock up until now. But Harrison wasn't happy with this. He instead asked for more time and went back and redid the clock again, and finally ended up with H4. H4 looked a lot more like a clock itself, and actually looked more like a pocket watch. But by the time he finished this, he was 80 years old, and he died 3 years later. But even though he died, the world of navigation and travel was never the same, thanks to his amazing contribution to the problem of longitude.